Are you looking to buy a Honda CR85 but not sure if it's the right dirt bike for you? I want to show you what kind of bike it is, why it may or may not be right for you, and then what to look for when buying a used one so that you don't get screwed over from a pile of junk that needs a rebuild. So first, what is the CR85? Well, it's a two-stroke 85cc motocross bike from Honda. It was made from 2003 to 2007 because Honda discontinued all their two-stroke dirt bikes in '07, unfortunately. It came from the CR80cc two-stroke, which was discontinued in 2002. The 85 is the mini bike class for teenagers, so like 11 to 15-year-olds. So this has a racing engine, and what can you expect from it? Well, it has about 20 horsepower, which is quite a bit for 85cc, but you need to know that the power curve is not like any other bike. It has basically no low-end torque. So here's the torque curve, and then once you get up to about 8,000 RPM, it's a huge spike in power, which makes it feel like a light switch. It's either on or off, which makes it really hard to control if you're a casual trail rider or if you're a beginner rider. So it's like, and that's not really an exaggeration because this two-stroke engine is tuned for maximum peak horsepower. And since it doesn't have a power valve, which can help give it a little bit more low-end torque, it's basically no power to a lot of power. And this can be very scary if you're just starting out riding because it's blah, 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 wow, wow, wow. And it can throw you off the bike very quickly if you're not prepared for it. And if you're concerned about the top speed, if you're a cool racer, riding in the desert, drag racing, whatever, it's about 65 miles an hour. But if you're riding a dirt bike like it should be, like in the trails or on the motocross track, you don't need to worry about top speed. It is a 6-speed manual clutch transmission, so first through 6th gear, and it's a close ratio, so when you're shifting up, the RPM doesn't drop very much to keep it in the meat of the power band, which means first gear is a little bit taller, which is not good if you're just starting out riding at low speeds or riding tighter trails, because you have to slip the clutch more, you have to give it more gas, you have to ride faster to let out the clutch and put your feet on the pegs, which doesn't really give you more confidence if you're just starting out. But if you are a racer and you're coming from a 65cc two-stroke, the 85cc is a great transition if you're not ready for a 125 or 250 motocross bike. Moving on to the suspension, the CR85 is meant for someone that's 80 to 100-ish pounds, and it's meant for racing on a motocross track. And what does this mean? Well, it has long travel, but it's stiffer than a trail bike. So it's meant to absorb those huge impacts of jumping or whoops or just really big bumps, and it does that really well if you're racing. But if you're just starting out riding, or if you're riding trails at 5, 10, 15 miles an hour, it's going to feel harsher, it's going to feel stiffer, you're going to feel it in your arms and hands a lot more. It's not going to be as comfortable, you're going to get fatigued quicker. Now, as far as the handling goes, this is a mid-size motocross bike, which means that it's good if you're 4'8" to 5'4" height range, whether you're getting the small wheel or the big wheel, which I'll cover in just a minute. Compared to a full-size bike, it's going to be easier to handle because the lower center of gravity, so it takes less effort to lean and turn, and you're not as likely to tip it over. And coming in at around 155 pounds, the CR85 is extremely light for its size. And while having a lightweight dirt bike is good if you're a beginner, this isn't the right choice for a lightweight bike. And then what about reliability? Well, the CR85 is a pretty reliable dirt bike if you are properly maintaining it. So if you are changing the transmission and clutch oil, if you're keeping the air filter clean so that dirt doesn't get sucked into the engine, if you're using good quality gas, proper oil mix ratio, and the carb jetting is right, this bike can last for quite a while, especially if you are a trail rider. But since it is a small bore two-stroke that requires you to ride it at high RPM if you want to have good power, this means that the engine is going to be spinning a lot more, so it's more likely to wear out faster. So the reliability is good. It's not likely to break down, but it's not as durable, so it's more likely to wear out quicker. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're just more likely to need to change the piston rings or the piston more frequently compared to a 125 or a 250 or especially a trail bike that's a lot more durable. So if you want a low maintenance dirt bike, the CR85 is not a good bike to start on. Now comparing the small wheel versus the big wheel, the small wheel has 14 and 17-inch wheels and tires, where the big wheel has 19 16-inch wheels and tires. If you're 4'8" to 5 foot, then you'll probably be fit better on the small wheel because it's going to be easier to touch the ground. The small wheel has a 32.4-inch seat height, where the big wheel has a 34-inch seat height. So over 1.5 inch difference, making it easier or harder to touch the ground. And the big wheel, or the CR85 Expert model, the bigger wheels are going to be a little bit more stable. They'll handle jumps better, obstacles better, and higher speeds better because of the longer wheelbase and the bigger diameter wheels. And then the suspension is going to be valved a little bit stiffer on the big wheel. When Honda got rid of the CR85, they came out with the CRF150R, which is the 4-stroke motocross race bike in the Super Mini class. And the big difference is that the CR85 is considerably lighter. I think it's about 30-pound difference, so it's going to be easier to handle if you're not super strong. Whereas the 150R, it's going to have a little bit more low-end to mid-range torque, which makes the power a little bit easier to handle, but it's still pretty snappy, pretty aggressive, and the 150R is definitely harder to kickstart. How much can you expect to spend on a used CR85 since you can't buy them new? Well, it depends on your area as well as the year and the condition of the bike. But a CR85 in Minnesota generally goes for $1,000 to a little over $2,000. And what should you look for when buying a CR85? Well, a lot of these bikes are owned by kids, teenagers that did not take care of them very well. Some of them were race bikes and they were maintained very well. So you need to pay attention to the little things to see how well it was maintained. So check the oil, check the air filter, check the chain tension, the tires, the sprockets. Just look if the bike is straight and clean, and if the oil is changed regularly, if the air filter is clean, if everything looks straight, there's not missing bolts or mismatched bolts, then that's good signs that the bike is more likely that it was maintained well and will be reliable for you. So is the CR85 good for beginners? Well, I already covered that, and the answer is no, because it's harder to control because of the snappy power and the stiff suspension. And is it good for trail riding? Well, I started out on a CR80 for trail riding, which is basically the same thing, and I can tell you it was not a fun experience because no low-end power, and then the light switch power on higher RPM made it harder and more frustrating to ride. It stalled more easily. It's just not a very good trail bike. So if you are a beginner or you want an easy to ride, low maintenance trail bike, then you should check out this video here where I cover the best dirt bikes for beginners or casual trail riders.